story now, but one that's much closer to home. And that's the disgraceful scenes of police brutality we've been witnessing in Canada in recent days. Just look at these images. These are people peacefully protesting against the totally unscientific authoritarianism of Justin Trudeau's corona law. And they're met with more authoritarianism, black-shirted thugs bristling with body armor, clubbing peaceful protesters as if they were seals on the Canadian ice. Absolutely despicable. And not a peep out of BLM or CNN or the Democrats or all the people who endlessly lectured us about police brutality after George Floyd. We condemned what happened to George Floyd. Of course we did. All police brutality is wrong and totally unacceptable, whoever it's aimed at. But it seems that the Democrats and the media are fine with police brutality as long as it's directed at blue-collar workers. Shame on them. Never listen to a word they say about social justice ever again. Fox News contributor Lisa Boothe joins us now to react. Lisa, what do you make of this? Isn't it just... It's just unbelievable, these scenes, and also the reaction, or the lack of a reaction, from those people who lectured us endlessly about police brutality.
Well, and the irony is, I think the left, they're okay. They want police states. They want authoritarianism as long as they're the ones that are in charge. And that's the scariest thing. And that's the scariest thing about COVID, Steve, over the past couple of years, is witnessing how susceptible free nations are to tyranny. I mean, you have Trudeau treating these truckers, treating these Canadians as if they're terrorists. And why? Because they hold, quote unquote, unacceptable views for wrong think. I mean, look at what they want. All they want is bodily autonomy. They want the right to say no to vaccines that are experimental and ineffective. But that's their crime, is wrong think. And then instead, see how Trudeau has treated them. He has invoked the Emergencies Act. He has turned Canada into a police state. He has had people arrested. He has frozen bank accounts, and he's not alone in this mentality either. I mean, look at what's happening in the United States. You have the Biden administration try to label parents standing up for their kids at school boards as domestic terrorists and try to weaponize the DOJ against them. So this march towards authoritarianism, both here in the United States and abroad, is real, and people need to wake up to it.
I totally agree. By the way, I mean, I wouldn't say that the vaccines are ineffective. I'd say that they're effective at protecting you, but not anyone else. So there's absolutely no case for these mandates. They're completely unjustified on any scientific grounds. And you're exactly right that they love this excuse to push this control. And the fact that it's, you know, it's directed at the exact same people who, at the beginning of all this, oh, we have to sort of, you know, like really make sure that we recognize the heroism of the essential workers, whatever. When the essential workers turn around and disobey the diktats of the technocrats and the politicians, suddenly they're the enemy.
Well, and the reason I said that is because we were originally told they would stop transmission. That's not happened, and allegedly it's taken
absolutely right.
multiple shots to, you know, to prevent, is what they're saying. So that's why I called them that. But to your point, Steve, I mean, look at the mentality of the left. Look at something that the governor of Connecticut recently said in lifting some mandates. He said, "You have earned your freedom." That's what he thinks he's the liberator when he's the oppressor.
I missed that.
When the left are the oppressors. He said, "You have earned your freedom." That's what he said, Steve. But what he doesn't understand is our liberty is God-given. It's not government-given. The Constitution protects our God-given liberty from the government. We were born free. We don't need the governor of Connecticut to give us that liberty. And so what I hope that Americans take from what we have seen throughout COVID is looking at the government and deciding what role we want the government to have in our lives. I mean, you look at the way the left has abused their power. What have they done? They've used COVID to get more power, to amass more power, to force vaccines on people, to force mask mandates on people. And then you look at what Governor Ron DeSantis has done in Florida. He has kept it free. He has gotten the government out of the way. He has respected individual liberty. That's the difference between the two political parties. And so I hope people take that mentality. They are clear-eyed and heading to the midterms this November, because we're in the fight of our lives for freedom and for liberty.
I totally agree. That's what I keep trying to remind people. You know, it was Democrats who masked our kids. It was Democrats who closed our schools. It was Democrats who shut down local businesses. All of it unjustified. None of it made a difference. You just look at the data, the comparison between Florida and somewhere like California with the extreme corona shutdowns. There's no justification for it. It was all about their power control, wanting to be the center of attention. They should be held accountable. We totally will focus on that. Lisa, great.
Of the middle class over the past few decades.
But now, with their response to the truckers' revolt, the mask is off. Democrats and their stooges in the media have stopped pretending. They hate workers. They really do think that workers are the deplorables, racists, conspiracy theorists, basically just scum. Watch.
It's not just truckers. There's a lot of, I've heard there's QAnon supporters in the crowd.
This is much more complicated than just a small group of people who are frustrated about vaccine mandates. Not when you're waving Nazi flags and Confederate flags and having far-right extremists marching in the streets and threatening local residents.
It's a cult.
Yes, it is.
Oh, yes, it is. Democrats and their media servants want to crush the workers. First, they set the stage by making them seem dangerous. Here's the Washington Post. The movement shares an affinity with Trumpist, toxic, authoritarianist, is that a word? Politics. And this from Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
Well, it's dangerous. They're inciting and encouraging people to break the law and to do so in a way that devastates so many hardworking people.
And then they just come straight out and say it. The workers must be crushed. This was from a CNN analyst. Slash the tires, empty gas tanks, arrest the drivers, move the trucks. Remember, these snooty elitists waging their class war from above, who look down their noses at blue-collar workers, the only reason they're able to lounge around in their Lululemon yoga pants working from home the last 2 years was because blue-collar workers kept their power on and got their oat milk and weed and vegan sausages delivered. But perhaps even worse than the condescension and racist smears was the way they tried to delegitimize a workers' protest as their favorite new insult, an insurrection.
Where the police chief says COVID protests are a, quote, nationwide insurrection driven by madness.
Just think of the language. I know it sounds familiar to you, right? A threat to democracy, an insurrection, sedition.
Some of the organizers of this protest, which, as I mentioned, started more than a week ago, they do want to overthrow the government.
You have an insurrection underway in the capital of a very important country.
When you try to crush dissent by falsely branding a political protest as an insurrection, that is the definition of authoritarianism, of fascism. Do the Democrats and CNN and MSNBC and all the rest even realize how reckless and anti-American their rhetoric is? We have to stand up to these bully boy tactics. They're not calling the truckers insurrectionists because they actually think they want to overthrow the government with violent means. They're doing it because they can't stand any challenge to their ideology, their we know best, centralizing, technocratic zealotry. They are trying to intimidate people from challenging them, and we must not allow it to succeed. A key part of that is staying on the high ground ourselves. That's why it was so self-defeating and ridiculous for the RNC the other week to describe the Capitol riot as legitimate political discourse. No, it was a riot, and a riot is not legitimate political discourse. Not when Antifa does it, not when BLM does it, and no, not when Trump supporters do it either. The Republican Party has a massive opportunity right now. Do not screw it up. As we saw in the 2020 election, thanks to Trump, the GOP is becoming a multiracial working-class coalition. That is something we've long argued for here. It will give Republicans a political advantage for a generation. There are more working Americans than there are work-from-home elitists. I know whose side we're on. We always have been. We say it at the top of the show every Sunday. We are proudly pro-worker and proudly pro-America. Let's make sure we pursue those aims positively and on the basis of clear and consistent principle. Make sure you share this important message